in terms of potential impacts on the mine workings themselves, on tailing piles, the first mitigation measure in the application says we're not going to directly, indirectly excavate, grade, undercut anything that would destabilize and affect these tailings piles. And we assume that those anti-degradation measures would all be made conditions of approval of the CUP. In terms of this possibility of excavating and breaking into a mine tunnel, as Keith indicated, we know pretty well where they are. Some of the old drawings that show mine workings, they might be old, but they're beautiful, and they're more detailed than you'd ever see from anything now. The only problem with them is getting them geo-rectified, and that's where new technology steps in, and we can survey and know that's where that is. The historical documents that we talk about how mining developed in the watershed, we know all of that. So even though we may not know where towers go, where lift towers go at this point, because the lift designers and engineers have to come in and figure that out first, we know where they won't be. And they won't be on mine tailings piles. And we have the wherewithal to make sure that they're not over a mine tunnel. And it occurs to me, not to be too facetious or too trite about it, but if you're digging a hole 10 feet deep and worried about hitting a mine tunnel, then you got to think that digging tunnels is hard work. Miners didn't dig them for sport. If a miner needed to be 10 feet under where you want to put that tower, he'd have dug where you're digging. You know, it's not, the tunnels don't ease around in shallow depths and sneak up on you. They're known and they're deep. And if you're within 10 feet of one, you're probably in good eyesight of the hole in the ground and the big pile of dirt that was dug to make it. So I think the idea of inadvertently digging into a mine tunnel just it's not a serious concern. Okay, the other potential, or another potential, that's been noted in the past studies and that we've discussed in the and so forth, and that has been mentioned by board members, is recreation. That's an issue where total metals rather than dissolved ones definitely come into play, because some of those mine tailings are nasty. And running a motorized vehicle around on them, anything that creates dust where it's going to be breathed by humans is a bad thing, and it releases material to where overland flow and the next rainfall and so forth will carry it into the water system. And to date, recreational use, as you noted, has been unregulated. It's increasing. Motorized use in particularly is a problem. Snowbird might not have had the policy to regulate it in the past, but neither did they have really the means to regulate it, because it's an isolated place. Our assessment indicates that if they're back there, have access, have a human presence back there all the time, then they have the ability to preclude access, which is another stipulation, another mitigation measure listed in their application. It's they can make sure that it doesn't happen. They're not doing it themselves, and they can keep the public recreation, all recreation, off of those mine tailings piles. Another thing that recreation could threaten is, and this has to do with that potential for perhaps a big body of water being backed up in the live Yankee mine. I think you're aware of their efforts working with Ted Fitzgerald, with Trout Unlimited and so forth, to create a drain structure in one of the portals of that mine. There are at least 2 other portals that drain water too, so it's not as if whatever's going on there is the only thing that dictates how much water is in that mine. But point being that they've constructed that improvement, that remediation, which results in a dramatic improvement in water quality immediately below the site. If they can maintain it to the degree that it's effectively maintained, it continues to route water around the tailings pile and achieve those water quality objectives. And the other thing it does is assure a drain, that any water that's accumulating in that tunnel actually does drain. It's got cobble rock behind it, geotex fabric over it, covered with earth. Its intent is to keep water flowing through there, and it doesn't tex fabric over it. It drains 1 to 2 CFS. A third of the volume of the pipe, a quarter of the volume of the pipe, and if there was a big body of water back there exerting pressure on that, it'd be coming out harder than that, it'd fill the pipe. So to our estimation, that looks like a system that's in equilibrium. As water builds up in the tunnel, it drains. And then in terms of winter recreation, as is, I guess, logic and it dictates, and as has been said here, it's not happening any place but over several feet of snow that preclude any impact on the ground surface. Anyway, so that recreational user days, the number of people recreating there would certainly increase, but what they're doing would be much less impactful on these potential sources of contaminants.